You guys ready to hear a really stupid hot take made by an even less intelligent human being? Well, we're about to.
Here's my unpopular opinion.
Is it really going to be an opinion that anyone would share at all, or is it just going to be the opinion of some babbling idiot who barely knows how to string together a sentence without looking like he's ready to pass out from a lack of oxygen to his brain?
I believe that porn should be our sex education for our schools.
Why? I mean, really, why? That's such a fucking ridiculous premise to make. Dude, porn doesn't teach you about safe sex, about protection, about consent, about rape prevention or rape crisis hotlines, or about birth control, or about like conduct for when you're a young adult or a teenager when it comes to how you engage with other people in the thought like in the intention of forming a sexual relationship or with the intent of doing that. That seems like such a fucking weird hot take to have because it sounds like something an idiot says when they think they're being subversive, when the reality is it just comes off as I'm too stupid to understand what the fuck I'm saying, so everyone else has to explain it to me and tell me how what I'm saying works, even though it really doesn't. I'm gonna pause for a minute, then I'll explain why it is this does not work and why it would never work. The reason this idea doesn't work is because you're trying to compare fictional, hyper stylized choices in filmmaking to be the benchmark for which people judge relationships and safe sex. You're essentially trying to make the equivalence of five people jerking off on a woman's face, for example, to two teenagers having sex for the first time consensually in the privacy of one of their own homes. And you're trying to say that one of those things that's bound to happen that a parent could talk to their kid about and that a school could kind of educate people about in terms of like safe sex, contraceptives, birth control, things to that effect. And you're trying to suggest that a film industry should somehow be in charge of these things when the industry is more concerned with money above all else. Because let's be honest here, nothing that happens in porn ever happens to anyone in real life. In terms of like a regular, mundane, regular person's life. Unless you're making millions and millions and millions of dollars to the point to where you can afford to have all these like really crazy, extravagant sexual exploitations. And even then, people don't really need to hear about that because that's a person's personal life and it doesn't need to bleed into the public. I mean, you're essentially setting people up to have unrealistic expectations about what these experiences are about, what these parts of their life are going to be about, and that doesn't seem like it's going to help them when they have these kind of unrealistic expectations. Because what's going to happen is, like, imagine, for example, if you were to actually do this, all it's going to do is make young men feel insecure about the size of their dicks. It's going to make young women feel insecure about the look of their bodies compared to these women who have either had, like, a shitload of personal trainers or either just naturally gifted with particular assets given their genetics, or these people that have had just a shitload of surgery done to look good. Like, you're not going to help these people feel better about themselves when you try to essentially put an image in front of them of what the idealized relationship is. Not to mention the fact that these people are barely still figuring out who the hell they are yet. And you're trying to pressure wash their brain with images and ideas that they themselves haven't even formed on their own. I mean, this isn't like a parent sitting you down and talking to you about safe sex and about contraceptives. You're trying to suggest that people watch porn as a way to try to be educated about safe sex. That's like playing Grand Theft Auto to try to get an understanding of how to be a criminal in the real world. It doesn't work because it's all over the top shit that you know no human being could actually pull off because it just sounds ridiculous. I mean, this whole concept is ridiculously idiotic because this would not work in the real world. Like, at all. And you're trying to suppose that it would. This is legitimately the thought process of a stupid person. Like, despite all the other reasons that I just mentioned, it's also the fact that it doesn't make any sense to do this because, like, teenagers don't really know a lot about life yet. So giving them these unrealistic standards will only do harm to them and harms their, like, personal and social development in the terms of, like, dating and relationships. Because realistically, I've never once seen anything in porn that says, look out guys, take your birth control, look out guys, wear a condom, look out guys, make sure you have valid consent. Because realistically, I doubt any of these actually involves like a full-on, like, the more you know kind of segment where they actually sit down, the actors and actresses, to discuss what they believe would be important information for a audience to know. Especially since considering the fact that most of the people that watch porn are people in their late teens or even in their early teens. Like people who have a general idea because their parents have most likely already had the talk with them. And they've most likely already either attended sex ed or are currently attending sex ed as I speak. Not to mention the fact that the most important things you could probably learn about sex and relationships would come from your parents telling you about things that you need to know in terms of safe sex, birth control, contraceptives, like who you can talk to if something's, like if you're being like abused in some way in the relationship, or if you're like someone's done something to you that you didn't like, that you feel like you can't talk to about it. Like there are people willing to listen to you about that. There are crisis hotlines for these types of things. I'm just saying, like, realistically speaking, this is not a solution that would help anyone or benefit anyone. Not to mention that it almost sounds like fucking grooming. It really does. It sounds more like grooming when you're suggesting that a bunch of like 12 to 15-year-olds sit down and watch hardcore porn in high school or middle school to teach them about sex. Because let me just give my personal anecdote. I don't know if this is like standard for every school in the country, but when I learned sex ed, I was 13 fucking years old. Like I was barely starting to be a fucking teenager. And you're trying to suggest that people 13 to 15 should just have porn broadcast to them as part of a school curriculum when we have no idea how teenagers handle the psychological and emotional load, no pun intended, that comes with seeing these things without understanding the proper context behind these types of interactions. Because there is no context that these people are in a relationship or that these people have known each other and they've actually gotten to know each other and trust each other enough to engage in an activity that requires this level of intimacy and trust in a relationship. That's another thing, is the fact that this gives people the idea that you can just fuck anyone you want in school and like you'll have nothing to worry about. Like the reality is it's just gonna set these people up to fail. Because unfortunately teenagers are kind of fucking stupid. They do a lot of stupid shit because they're teenagers and they don't think about anything. And it's not a good precedent to set, because what happens is you got a bunch of people that are fucking horny as shit and fucked up because their hormones are starting to kick in. And instead of having like a calm talk about what these things mean when you're starting to enter this phase of development, it immediately goes to porn. Like, do you understand how that would confuse someone, right? Like, they wouldn't, like, be sat down with their teacher or their family members, like, someone that they can talk to about it, and that they can learn about it, in a way that would actually be beneficial to them to understand what's going on with them. Instead, it's a matter of, well, now we need to throw porn in front of you, because that's miraculously going to make you understand all these really important nuances about growing up and becoming a person. Like, you understand how that just doesn't make any fucking sense, right? Like, you just get how that makes you sound like a complete babbling spastic, because it just sounds like you're trying way too hard to come off as someone who's being, like, creative or subversive in the way he's thinking about things. You're not. You're just saying something fucking stupid and hoping that someone takes it seriously enough to actually give it a try. Let me explain to you how that would work. It would fall flat on its face and fail miserably, because nobody with that level of mental development should be seeing that, period. Because they themselves don't know how to interpret relationships yet. Most likely because they've either not been in one yet or they've just started to understand the concept of a relationship with someone in their peer group. So the whole concept of exposing like kids between the ages of like 13 to 15 to this stuff, that doesn't work. I mean, there's a reason that all those films that you see have like a fucking maturity thing. It's like you have to be 18 or older to view this content because it's relying upon the person's preconceived understanding that this is fiction and not real life. That these are two people acting in a situation that has been organized by a director and by a film writer, not by regular people who are just going about their day to day lives. You're seemingly ignoring that big ass fucking glaring detail that these are not average everyday people. These are actors and actresses paid to do this shit, who have most likely trained their bodies to do this kind of stuff. I imagine that if someone were actually trying to imitate some of the crazy shit people pull in these movies, they'd probably get really badly fucking hurt. I mean, your idea is ridiculous, and your existence is like a blight on this planet that should be resolved with a corrosive acid bath.